All right. I think, and I suspect that we are probably live. I will ask Sister T, please check. I think maybe you should log off now and then go on Facebook to just confirm that we're good. I have my phone here. You can give me information. All right. Welcome, everyone. I do want to apologize for starting late. I had a bit of a technical issue, but I think we are on now. And yes, we are about, what, 5 or maybe 10 minutes late. I do apologize. Let me quickly introduce everyone that we have so far. I'm actually hoping that you could give me information and let me know where you're watching from. If you're watching, it will be great to be able to see who is online, who is with us, who is not with us. It will be great. Our guests, let me quickly introduce them. My very good friend is the handsome man wearing the pair of glasses. He's a chemical engineer by academic training, but he has also been a pastor for the last, going on 30 years now, somewhere along those lines. I pulled him in because in his years of exposure to the body of Christ, he has had to deal with several circumstances and scenarios that have related to this particular topic that we are dealing with today. Pastor Chooks, please say hi to everybody.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Awesome.
I'm excited. Awesome. Thank you for having me on the team.
And you could be here. Also, for those of you that are familiar with the church that I pastor, you will be quite familiar with the other young man that is on your screen, Nkosi Gugushe. He is the COO of AP Energy. He is here because he's also one of the teachers that teaches our teen church. My son is part of that particular age group. And some of the conversations that have ensued in his interactions with them has actually spurred this conversation right now. We'll realize that a lot is happening in that bracket. And unfortunately, I suspect, and maybe Doc will eventually address this for us, I suspect a lot has also been happening even in the younger age brackets, even before they hit the teen years. And so I brought him online to just give us, a good idea of some of the conversations that's going on there. He's also the father of teen kids as well. And then finally, the beautiful lady that is with us, the only one that is with us to break this masculine testosterone vibe that we have going here, is the wonderful Dr. Ilze Alberts. I'm so glad that you could join us. She is a family psychologist, been practicing for over 30 years. She's an accomplished author, and she really plays in this space quite a bit. Somewhere along the line, we'll give you an opportunity give her an opportunity to actually show us a few of the books that she has written, and probably give us a few rundowns on some of the information there. So she is a psychologist and has worked a lot with children as it relates to matters like this. So please say hi, Doc, please.
Good evening, everyone.
That is awesome. I think we are good to go. You will bear with me, I'm a pastor, and so by default, I open everything with a word of prayer. Can I pray? Father God, as we do this, let your wisdom speak for us, counsel us, help us as we attempt to help others. In Jesus' name, amen. All right?
Amen.
Fantastic. Now let's run into this. Are we game? Are we all game?
Yes.
Very good.
Yes, sir. Fantastic. If you are watching, pass a comment. If you have a question, send it through. I am not watching, so if you do send a question, I do have someone that is administrating the communication that is going on Facebook, and they will send me a message on my phone. So if you see me on my phone, please don't think I'm being disrespectful. It's so that I can understand the questions that have been asked, so that subsequently we can engage them if we have enough time. All right, so let's start from the very beginning. We're dealing with our kids and porn, so that we're all on the same page, particularly with those that are listening. How do we define porn? I think I will start with our psychologist that is online. When we talk about porn, what readily comes to mind? What should we appreciate when we talk about porn? Please talk to us, Doc.
You know what? I actually want to read from the book that I've written for children. That pornography includes any images of naked people or people who are having sex. Pornographic material can include photographs, pictures in books or magazines, videos, DVDs, movies, or photographs or footage sent via cell phones, email, or found on the internet. And
Ooh,
my next
very
sentence is saying pornography is not for children.
Could you put the book up? Let's see the book again. Since you're already reading from it, let's get a general idea. It's all on her website. We'll put up the website as well as we go along. Easy answers to awkward questions. Easy answer to awkward questions. No, I find that when I saw the book, I was so stoked, by it. I also saw another one, how to start, forgive me if I get the title wrong, how to start a conversation about the birds and bees. Something along.
Yes, I've written a manual for parents, and then there's another one for younger kids. Just a very simple story. Where do I come from?
Where do I come from? I think it's extremely helpful. We'll put the details. They're all on her product line that is on the website. Anything else anyone wants to add? I think her definition of pornography was quite comprehensive. So we're talking about naked material, and she also mentioned part of the accessibility. Anyone of you on the panel want to add anything to that before we move on?
Not necessarily to add, Pastor, to the definition, but I think the fact that Dr. Ilze talks about the kind of books and the audience she's targeting and the simplicity of the definitions is testimony to the fact that these are conversations about real issues that need to be had with our children from a very, very young age. And I think a lot of us, notwithstanding your introduction in terms of where I'm coming from in finding that we are dealing with teens, but I think we know through society, the prevalence of the internet, the prevalence of smartphones and that kind of accessibility, that children as young as 5 years old are being exposed to, one, both pornography, but two, consequently, things like sexual violence. And we've seen from reports in our courts as to how prevalent even sexual violence of young children is as infants. So these are conversations that need to be had with children from as young as possible. And that's what I just wanted to highlight.
No, and that is so true. I guess, again, this is why some of the books that Doc has written are quite helpful, because they actually broach the conversation with our kids. I won't lie, when I had to have the conversation about sex with my son, quite a few years ago, he's 15 now, so when he was quite a bit younger, it was difficult. I didn't know where to start, Doc. I wish I'd seen your book earlier on. I fumbled, went all over the place, talked to the moon, before we eventually got into the conversation. And it was quite disturbing, the amount of information he was already aware of, And I began to wonder, this is serious, So with my daughter, I started a bit earlier, because I realized that I was slightly too late with my son. Other people had given him some other kind of information, Pastor Chooks, do you want to make a comment before we push through on this?
Well, the truth is that there is so much that is available that our kids are learning. And I would want to believe that we are the best source of information around sexuality to them. And we need to get it right before their friends feed them information. Well, I learned that from my own development. I started reading from a young age. And when my parents didn't think I knew stuff because I read. So yeah. I used to be slightly embarrassed that they think that I don't know, but I knew stuff because I read. And in my own case, we were not really taught much. I had to find out things myself from books. So I'm glad that someone has written a good book. I would actually like to get a copy of the book. I have gone past that with my son now, but I would like to have that book in my library so that I can recommend for other parents to have that book to use to broach the subject.
Well, I've been telling parents for many years, possibly for the last 20 years, when I started to become aware of the importance for parents to empower themselves, they can talk to the kids, that by the age of 6, it's important that you as the parent have your first very important sexual conversations with your kids. Because if you don't do it, their friends will do it, their older brothers and cousins will do it. They will find information from sources that does not come in a warm, caring way. And if you can't start to talk to your preteen or your teenager about porn, if you've not laid the foundation and you build a trusting relationship where your children have the perception my parent is approachable, I can ask my parents questions, and my parents are open and honest with me and give me concrete, factual information in a warm, caring way. So I'm very for it that we must plant flowers in our children's mind that the weeds won't grow.
Now, what you just said is very troubling, because when we were growing up, you talk about the parental and you talk about in a warm, caring way. You talk about being in a situation where your kids feel as though they can approach you. I don't know about the lot that are watching, but I grew up in an environment where the thought that we could talk to our parents about sex. If somebody is watching on Facebook, there is a feedback coming. Could we, if your Facebook feed is on, I'm speaking to one of our guests, now. I'll ask that you turn your microphone on if you don't mind, because we're getting feedback. All right.
Myself?
No, I'm just checking if someone's Facebook is on in the background, because your Facebook is on, it's feeding into the conversation. Because I don't know, I'm getting feedback, and we shouldn't be. All right, so let's continue. I was saying I grew up in an environment where the thought of having a conversation like this with my parents was impossible. That was not possible at all. Sorry, I need to see if I could. We're getting information that we are echoing, and I'm wondering why there is an echo.
Perhaps, my lord, you could mute us all and then allow us to speak as you.
Let me see if that will help. Yes. Oh, fantastic. That is like a superpower we just pulled off there. I'm grateful. All right, so I was saying, it wasn't a conversation that I could have with my folks. It was impossible. It was ridiculous that I would actually sit with my mom and say, let's talk about sex. My mom would have been so embarrassed, and I probably would have threatened me that where did I hear that word, And I don't know how else. And so coming into parenthood, I realized that was a very, very uncomfortable conversation for me to start with my own kids. Very, very uncomfortable. And now I realize, after pastoring for 2 decades myself, I realized that, my goodness, we better solve this problem. The number of parents that are now plagued with this crisis has caused me to realize that if we don't get ahead of the curve, if we don't find proper material, if we don't engage this and teach parents how to engage this conversation, we are going to raise children that will be worse than us. If you understand what I'm saying, they will be worse than us. All right, let's push the conversation forward. Now, since we're all in agreement that when it comes to kids, porn is not something that should be tolerated. Porn is not something that that kids should be exposed to. I quickly want to then ask, Pastor Chooks, I want to ask you, so would you regard porn, could porn be an addiction? Or is it just something that we just engage? Will you say that porn could be an addiction?
Yes, pornography is terribly addictive, terribly so. My studies show that, the centers in the brain that activate from alcohol and from drugs are the same centers that activate when porn is consumed. So porn is extremely addictive, and it's been shown by multiple research. I found a website. That website is called yourbrainonporn.com. Yourbrainonporn.com. And it has tons and tons of scientific research, all of them 100% from different universities around the world. All of them 100% show that porn affects your brain, rewires your neurology. So the same way drugs affect you, the same way that porn affects you. So porn is very addictive and very, very harmful to young children.
No, I'm so glad you said that. When you gave the website and you said it had tons and tons of, I was a bit frightened. I thought you were about to say tons and tons of pornographic material. I was about to say, are we I think we're on the wrong site. You know. But yes, okay. Anyone want to add anything to that? I do concur. I do think that porn is strongly addictive. So does anybody have anything else you want to add to that thought?
Yes, it is as addictive as alcohol, drugs, shopping. There are many kinds of addictions. And the reason why it's also so addictive, in a very simple explanation, is there's huge amounts of serotonin and dopamine that gets secreted by the brain, and those are all the feel-good feelings. So it's a very easy addiction to start to form, and I think it is such an important conversation for parents to have with their preteens. The youngest child that I had seen that came to me for therapy was 5 years old, and her parents caught her watching real hardcore porn. So when I think, Nkosi, you mentioned the 5-year-old, and I thought you're absolutely correct. It can start as young as that. But what I really encourage parents is, as your children go into their pre-teens, and that is 11, 12, before they become teenagers, we call that the tweens before the teens, to start to have the conversations already. And what I said to my son, for instance, my son is 31 now, but when he was 11, 12 years old, I said to him, your mind is very, very precious, and your mind belongs to you. And they know my saying that I've said for many years, make sure you plant flowers in your mind so that no weed can grow. You know, if we plant flowers in our gardens, there's no place for weed to grow. And I said to him, you are going to get, your friends will invite you to watch porn with them. They will tell you that it's so cool to watch it. And I said, you are going to be curious about it, and you're going to want to watch it. But just know one thing. Once you start to watch it, you will want to watch it again. When that starts to happen with you, it's important to say to yourself, what am I planting in my mind? Am I planting flowers or planting weeds? So you have to tell your children they're going to get invitations to watch it. Their friends are going to pressurize them to watch it. I had boys of 18 years old saying to me, what parents don't know is that the boys have gigs and gigs of porn on their phones. So if we don't speak to them about it and tell them why it's not wise to watch it, if we just tell them don't watch it, it's wrong. Most teenagers say parents are stupid, we know much better than our parents. You know how wise our kids can be when they're teenagers. But to let them understand what happens to their mind, what happens to their brain. Make it not don't do it, but these are the reasons why not.
Nkosi, you raised your hand. I assume you wanted to mention something. Please go right ahead.
I wanted to add 2 points, my lord. The first is that I think one of the things that we need to understand is the insidious nature of the addiction of porn. And it's a problem not only for adults. You can imagine, we've seen statistics on the dangers of porn, other forms of addiction, such as chemical addictions, drugs, alcohol, and so on. So you take that same substance or that same danger, and then you literally, let's say, open the doors to a young child. It doesn't matter how old they are. We know that even adults are addicted to porn. So I'm just saying, can you imagine, as the younger they get, the less control they have, the less their subconscious is open to be influenced by many things. It's that kind of insidiousness and danger that we are essentially opening our children to if we don't address this. Imagine moving into a new neighborhood, let's say a farm somewhere in Midrand or Glen Austin or one of these places with nice big estates, but you know that there are scorpions and snakes there, and you don't necessarily educate your children about how to be to protect themselves, how to be aware, how to look out. That's exactly what we do as parents when we don't necessarily empower our children on the dangers of porn. But two, we also need to understand that there's a broader context of society that says sexuality sells. So as Dr. Ilze said, if you're not talking to your children about love, sexuality, relationships as a foundation, self-worth as a foundation, then you are necessarily leaving them open to these dangers. And as we said, between the internet, I mean, just a billboard where you look at adverts on television and how sexuality is implicitly sold. And of course, 90% of those adverts feature the bodies and or the sexuality of women. And there's a very big influence, a very big difference in terms of the impact of porn on boys and on girls. And that's something else that is a myth that we need to bust, is this thing that this is a men problem, this is a guy problem, this primarily affects boys, whereas it's actually a human problem. And I can tell you, if you think of misogyny, if you think of self-worth, if you think of all the ways in which we socialize young girls, if you don't start addressing the issues of pornography, but as I said, on the foundation of healthy self-love, relationships, physicality, and so on, you are really setting ourselves up for an Armageddon. And as you rightfully said, we as parents, we as adults today have these issues, but we find that we struggle to even engage with our own children or those that we have responsibility for as wards and or stewards, because we've got shame, we've got embarrassment, we've got our own issues. We can't even vocalize these things. And that's why we need to deal with this, hence the importance of this platform. Thank you, my Lord.
No, that's very important to appreciate. Let me quickly add this. When we talk about the dangers of porn, and I would like us to go into that now. We've talked about, and we've all agreed that porn is addictive. One of my major challenges with all forms of addiction, including pornographic addiction, is the need for more. I've been dealing with quite a few cases where individuals talk about how they started with some little exposure. And then after a while, they discovered that they were not getting the same kind of, the dopamine that you spoke about that is being released by the brain. They weren't getting the same kind of release that they initially got when they were exposed to certain kinds of porn. And so they found themselves digging deeper and going deeper till they found themselves being exposed to some dangerous stuff, to some very, I was dealing with a young lad, and when he was trying to get into some of the stuff that he had now gotten involved in so that he could get that level of high, that initial release, I realized that if he is not helped, the next thing is he will translate that into something tangible. It will go from the screens into trying to do it in order for him to get that level of high. And that's what all addiction does. It sucks you in one way and then pulls you deeper, and you need more, and you need more, and you need more. I see Pastor Chooks, you wanted to say something. Please come in here.
Okay, there you go. There you go. there's something that Nkosi said that I want to touch on a little bit. There is this shame around sex that parents have that inhibit them from talking to their kids about sex in a healthy way. Sex is a taboo word. It's something we do, we don't talk about. So the shame around sex, some people even almost think sex to be a 4-letter word, but it's not. So that whole shame around sex is not allowing parents to even go there to talk about it to their children. So they end up having to get information from somewhere else. And like Nkosi said, I 100% agree. When we don't teach them and we don't show them, we open them up to all sorts of things coming into their minds. And so the shame around sex needs to be broken off the minds of parents. And the reason for the shame, some of it is something we picked up growing up. Some of it is our own sin around the subject, because sin has shame. You know, if you remember in the Garden of Eden, the moment they sinned, you know, they became ashamed and they began to hide. So sin has shame around it. And for many of us, our sin around sex has helped to put more shame on it. So we struggle to talk to our kids about it. So what's the solution here? Parents need to be healed of the shame around sex. It comes from education, it comes from forgiveness. And let sex become clean and wholesome again. There's nothing wrong with the word sex. And we must not be ashamed to teach our children about healthy sexuality. Thank you.
Yeah, I was saying thank you very much. I think that's very helpful. That's information that we need to have. The shame is a major issue that many parents battle with. And I'm sure, Doc, you've experienced that. Parents themselves having a truckload on their shoulders based on experiences that they have been involved in that they have not resolved. And they bring those experiences, they bring the imagery of that, they bring the pain of that, the shame of that into their own parenting and transfer that to their children. I'm sure you want to throw something out there, Doc.
Yes, I just want to add as well that it's not only shame, there's also guilt and there's also fear. Many parents say that they fear when they talk to their kids about sex, that the kids will now go to school and tell their friends about it, and then their child will get into trouble and be labeled. So it sounds daunting for a parent to think, I must start to talk about sex with my children. But you don't start there. You build up. You build up the story. You first start by teaching them, for instance, the names of their private parts. And there are so many different ways to talk to them. And I want to encourage parents, if they don't know how to have the conversations and how to build up to have that conversation about sex, that you can later on build the conversation up to how to protect yourself from porn. You can't start there without starting at the beginning. It's a story that has to build up. And if parents don't know how to do it, I really encourage them to read books, empower themselves, understand how to talk to your child. My parents never spoke to me about it as well, but when my daughter, who is now 33 years old, was 5 years old, and she asked me, and I picked her up from a Christian nursery school that she was attending those years. And she said to me, Mom, can I ask you a question? I said, of course you can. She said, Mom, what is an abortion? And she was 5 years old. And I'm so grateful that she gave me that shock at that stage, because then I started to do lots of research. And the book was born from that, because I realized I want to empower myself so that I can empower my children. And there's a lot of information available for parents to empower themselves.
That's awesome. That's awesome. There's a question here that I think we should quickly address. Someone is asking, how do we find out exactly what our children already know when they are in their teens? So I guess this parent is probably has a child that's already a teenager and is saying, look, I've passed all these stages of the birds and the bees. I've passed all these stages of planting flowers in your mind. My kids are probably already exposed. How do I know what they already know? I think the answer is a bit obvious, but maybe we also could help with the how. Please go right ahead. Doc, you already unmuted. You want to jump right in. Jump right in. I'll give everyone an opportunity to do the same. Let's go for it.
When your children are teenagers, they know far more than you do. They are empowered, knowledgeable, and I remember giving a talk at the school to boys that was 13 years old, and to help them to know more about what I call the birds and the bees. They asked me questions that I didn't know how to answer, and I realized our children know far more than what we know. So I think what is more important, I so appreciate what Nkosi said, that for you as a parent with teenagers, have the conversations about how to have respect for your own body and respect for the body of the other person. How important it is to form caring relationships, that not to have unrealistic expectations of someone else, to show respect to another person, respect to yourself. I think that it's so important for parents to have warm, caring conversations with their teenagers about relationships and how to form great relationships, because those are the building blocks that will build up to the good relationships that will one day hopefully take place when they are married.
No, for me, that's fantastic. I think let me jump in there as well. I appreciate everything that you just said, Doc. That makes perfect sense. I do also, in my experience, one of the things that I found myself doing was, because I discovered that my son, when I sat him down, he was probably about what, maybe 8, 9. When I sat him down to start the conversation with him, he put his hand over his face, very embarrassed, and was like, don't, are you about to talk to me about sex? And I realized, oh, so you're already aware. Of course he was, and I knew that, but I feigned ignorance. So you're already aware. And I began to talk to him about what I already knew and what I thought he was old enough to appreciate at the time. But in that conversation, I kept on giving him opportunities to engage me on it. And by doing so, I was able to ascertain what he already knew. So what I recommend, if your child is already a teenager, I will say, know the information you want to communicate. So you want to communicate about the fact that, if you have sex with a lady, you're going to get pregnant. You want to communicate, you're going to get her pregnant. So if she's male, I speak from male, because my son is at that age that gives me concern, and so when you start that conversation, watch their body language. That's what has really helped me. I've had to have help a few parents have that conversation with their kids, and body language has very often helped me know that, okay, I just touched on a nerve. They don't agree with me, or they agree with me in ways that probably mean something has gone on in that arena. And so pay attention to their body language, and let that be cue points for you to know where to pause and ask a question. Do you disagree? Were you told something else? Are you aware of something else? The best you can do, even if they don't engage you back, at least give them the information. If you've waited till your child is a teenager before you are going to have this, then you're already battling with the residents, your children already pulling back and pulling away from you. They're not as as communicative as they used to be. The hugs that you used to get before are no longer coming as often, and that's okay. It's for a lot of parents, it's the teenage experience. But at least, even if they're not communicating, you communicate. Let it be clear that you have given them the necessary information. At this point, I need to quickly add, a lot of Christian parents struggle to have conversations about sex, also particularly as it relates to topics like condoms. And people say things like, and I think, Doc, you have just mentioned that as well. You know, that whole idea that if I was to mention that to my child, am I not equipping them to go do wrong? And so in our bid, because of that concern, you now do not equip them at all. And then you face the challenge. No, you know, one of the things that I did with my son, now with my kids, was we spoke about condoms. And one of the things that we emphasized was the fact that as a child of God, what God expects of us is that you will wait until you're married to have sex. But there is a reality that we face where many people struggle to have that sense of discipline. And because of that lack of discipline and being unable to keep themselves under check, they end up having sex before marriage. And if you're going to have sex, if you find yourself, you're going to have sex before marriage, you better ensure that there is protection. And I put it all out there. You know, protection so that unwanted pregnancy, protection against venereal diseases. And I gave a bit of a list on some of the venereal diseases without going into detail. Well, my conversation with my son has been a bit more detailed than my conversation with my daughter, who just turned 10 years old. You know, and in doing so, I will not lie to you, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed to the floor. You know, I couldn't wait for the conversation to be over. I was sweating like a pig about to be roasted, you know, but it was a necessary conversation. And that is something that I'm hoping that you will do out there as well. You know, Pastor Chooks, I think you wanted to jump in. You wanted to throw something out there if it's still relevant.
Yes. A few years ago, I was involved with a group where we went to schools to give sex talks. I did that for like 2-3 years. And I went to so many high schools around Gauteng province to talk to kids about sex. It was amazing what we observed. You know, some schools, they will allow you to talk, to give the talk in the big assembly. So you've got all the classes together. Sometimes they brought maybe a grade, say grade 9 or grade 10 or grade 11 or grade 12, and then you spoke with them. How I used to know how much these kids knew were the questions they were asking, the things that they were broaching when we gave the sex talks. It was scary that, you know, 9-year-olds knew stuff, 10-year-olds knew stuff that were quite unhealthy. So when a parent is saying, how do I know what my child knows? You need to have the conversation. The conversation will open it up and then allow them to ask questions. And also I know that many of us, you know, we parent with different models and different parenting styles. So some houses, kids are encouraged to ask questions about things. And in some places, you know, kids are not allowed to ask questions. I remember the first time my son asked me about sex. He was maybe 4 or 5 years old in 2012, if I remember. How old was he? He was 4 in 2012. Yes, somewhere there. We had gone for, I took him with me and I had gone for a meeting somewhere. And this preacher was talking and he made an illustration about animals having sex. Then my son turned immediately to me. He said, Daddy, what is sex in the church? So I said to him, I will explain to you after the service. So I used that opportunity to talk to him on our way home. and tell him what sex was. So the point I'm trying to make is you have to have that conversation to know what they know. If you have waited till they are teenagers, they have to have that conversation. One way would be, I still know that group that I used to be part of, they're still involved in giving talks. So they give talks to youth groups. Parents can organize a number of friends, of their children on a Saturday evening and invite that organization. And they come and give a talk to a group of teenagers, maybe from 15, 20 people. They can give that talk. And those are forums that maybe can help a parent. If you can't engage directly with your children to talk about it, then organize parents, other parents who have kids like that. If you're part of a church, maybe organize a youth group and get someone who gives this kind of talks professionally, and they can give that talk, and then the kids can ask questions. If it is too personal for you to engage with your kids, then just do it in a group. That's the point I'm making.
Like you and Dr. Alberts, we get you guys to come do it.
I'm happy to do
Nkosi,
that
I
for
see your hand. Fantastic. I see your hand, Nkosi, but I have a question here from those watching on the live feed. And the question is, how do you treat, this is a very disturbing one for me because it poses a potential risk. How do you treat a teenage relative that is exposed to pornography as a potential risk to your household? So I'm assuming this teenage relative probably lives with them and you've discovered that they're exposed to pornography, but it's not your child. Do you engage them directly or do you escalate to the parents? Do you engage them directly or did we all get the question? Can you just nod?
Yes.
Okay. Who wants to jump in at this? Who wants to start? I see, yeah, Doc, you have already unmuted because everybody wants to jump in on this. That's fantastic. Okay, Doc, let's start with you.
It all depends on your relationship with this person. If you have a close relationship and an open relationship, you can speak to I'm assuming it's a young adult or a teenager.
It's a teenager.
A teenager. But I think it's also important to have the conversation with the parents, because it's the parents' responsibility as well to step in. And I really want to encourage parents not to punish your children when you find out what they're doing, but to have the conversations. You cannot punish them if you've never had a conversation, if you've never set boundaries. You can't build a relationship like that. It's rather to open up the conversation, communicate what are the consequences of the choices, and if they continue to exercise that same choice, that there will be a consequence to their choices then.
Exactly. Nkosi, please.
If I may say a few things, Pastor, I think Dr. Ilze is very correct. Remember that one, as the parent or as the elder or the steward whom this teenager is living with, there is a direct responsibility you have in terms of your oversight responsibility for that child. Whether they're your child or not, the reason they're living with you is because you have been entrusted inter alia with their upbringing. So that imposes certain responsibilities, but also at the same time gives you certain privileges. Secondly, of course, to the extent that there's a threat perceived to your household, again, you have a responsibility in that respect. So you need to weigh up rights and responsibilities, but as Dr. Ilze then adds, you then also involve the parents or the person that is more directly responsible in that conversation as well. So that's how we do it. But I also want to go back to something that you'd asked earlier, and I think it's important to realize that, and especially I think in the church, the business of the church is about transformation, and I'm putting it sort of simply, but we transform minds, we transform lives, we transform people. Whether you're 5 years old, whether you're 85 years old, we are in that business of transformation. So I think for most parents, part of the question that was being asked around, so what if my teenager knows a lot and how do I know that? Yes, it would be useful to know where they are, but I think Dr. Ilze and Pastor Chooks and even yourself, Pastor Tim, have shared on how we can draw that out. What is important, however, is to understand from a mindset perspective that as a parent, it doesn't matter where they are. What is important is where you want to get them. And that's what we do as a church. We take you from wherever you are to where we'd like to get you, for want of a better description. So if you look at this glass, or the glass you're drinking from, Pastor Tim, this volume of air in here is what they know. And we always assume with our teens that they know a lot more than us, because they've just got more access to the internet, mechanisms of communication. So you always assume they know more. But the easiest way to switch what is in here is to pour something new. So the trick is, if I wanted to replace this air in here with something else, I wouldn't be sucking out the air and doing whatever. I'd just pour in a whole lot of water and fill this glass to capacity. So the key is to always, as a parent, say, this is what I want to teach my children, and to be deliberate about it. And then, irrespective of where you think they may be, irrespective of how much knowledge they have, you can always begin by pointing them in the right direction. Exactly. And filling that cup, replacing what's in that cup with what you want to pour in, begin to change that mindset. And that's the responsibility we have as essentially those who must teach. And perhaps in that process, part of what will happen is, of course, you will be empowered. Pastor Chooks has mentioned that there are professionals, there are forums, there are internet websites you can use. There Dr. Ilze has books on this. We've seen tons of material. So the ability to get information and be empowered to be able to help someone change is there. But as a parent, the key thing is first to decide that I want my children to know this about love, about relationships, about sexuality, about protecting themselves against pornography, etc., etc. And then to deliberately start pouring in. And any parent who's been part of even a new job, when you get to a new job, a new company, you learn a new culture. So we know that even for us, as established as we may think we are in our ways and in our habits, we still get into different environments and begin to learn new things and socialize differently and so on. And we can do the same with our teens. What makes this seem daunting is the fact that we often have our own inhibitions, our own guilt, our own shame, our own fear. And what you don't want to do is fall into that fear, worry, and pain cycle that keeps you stuck, keeps you caught. And that very question means that that parent is already realizing that I want to do something, and that's a good thing, even if you don't know what to do. That already, just asking that question as a parent means I recognize that I want to and can and should do something. And therefore, what I'm answering to is not necessarily the empowerment, which I think the other speakers have touched on, more than to say it's the right question, and it means you're at the right stage to say, let me jump in with my teenage son or daughter who knows more than me and begin to change. Thank you.
All right, permit me to jump in here. We're having quite a few questions that are coming through. Unfortunately, might not be able to answer all of them. I see a question from Sindiswa. I hope we're helping you out. I see a question from Sindiswa. She's saying, I read somewhere that bathing in front of your baby at a tender age also increases their curiosity about sex. Is this true? I hope we all got that. Bathing, that, you know, exposing yourself while they're much younger, that it exposes them to the whole concept of sex. Let me say something about that quickly. The truth is, without a reference point, they won't even know what sex is. So they could see you naked, you know, forever. But their minds won't go in the direction of sex if there's never been a reference point. They've never seen it on TV, heard something, you know, or observed you with someone before. It always takes a reference point for our brains to draw the lines, to make the connections, until you are entering into your much older years where puberty sets in, and then you begin to have physical, your body changes, and you actually begin to feel things in your body. The truth is, whether they're curious at a tender age, they will be curious at some point in time. It doesn't matter whether you were naked before, you know, in front of them now, and that's what created the curiosity, or whether it's an advert advertising a soap commercial that draws their attention to it. It's crazy what's out there. Either way, at some point, they will be exposed. So the fear that bathing nude in front of them creates a bit more of that. I don't think is necessary. I do think, though, that when they get to a certain age where they're becoming a lot more aware, particularly if they're of the opposite sex to you, when they're becoming more aware of their body, that practice needs to now change You now need to draw the line so that they begin to learn that this is private, and at some point they need to learn that. There's a reason it's called private parts. This is private, it's not for public display, and you're stopping your exposure to them, again, particularly when they're of the opposite sex, helps them begin to understand it. It's part of the lesson that you begin to teach them. I'm curious, Doc, I see you unmuted. What do you want to throw in?
It will definitely not make a child more curious about sex.
Exactly.
From the age of about 3 years, children become aware that there's a difference between males and females that's based on the genitalia. And a child goes through their own sexual development. I'm not talking about sex like we are looking at it as grown-ups. I'm talking about the sexual development as a boy or a girl. So from the age of 3, they become aware there's a difference. Around the age of 5, boys and girls become more aware that there's an impact that they have on each other. It's a very natural progression. Around the age of 4 to 5, their own very definite sexual identity is also formed then. So don't fear that your bathing in front of your children will make them think more about sex. They will think more about sex in their natural developmental phase, more or less around the age of 5 to 6 years. Also, if they sleep on the mattress next to your bed and the grown-ups have sex, and children wake up in the middle of the night and hear and see what is happening, that can create a curiosity. But it doesn't stimulate them to want to have sex because their brains are not developed for that yet.
Thank you for that. I think that's you've echoed my thoughts, maybe even a lot more eloquently. There is a question here. Umpo asked a question, but I really don't understand it. So if Umpo is still watching, please clarify your question so that we can give you a more articulate and specific answer. Umpo asked, is there a way that we can relate this to our experiences? I really don't fully understand what you're trying to ask. What do you mean by this? I really don't. Now, our time is fast spent. I want us to quickly deal with a few things. So we've agreed on a few things. Porn is not good. We've accepted that porn on our kids is even a lot worse. They don't even have the framework that we initially as adults have to be able to even process the information. So it does a whole lot more damage. But let's say, all right, how do we help a parent out there that is saying, all right, my child is already addicted to porn. What do I do? I realize my child is addicted to porn. Where do I start from? What can I do? Anyone want to bail the cat there? Any thoughts? Where do I start from? My child is already addicted. Where do I start from?
It is not the expertise of a parent to know how to deal with it when a child has an addiction already. If you find that your child's addicted to drugs, you go and find help. You find your teenager's addicted to porn, you go and find help. It's not the parent's expertise to know how to deal with the kids with that. So the best person to go and find help with is a social worker, a psychologist. I'm sure that you have wise people at your church that can deal with that as well. But it's for the parent to say, I need help for my child.
If I may add, Pastor.
Echo that. Okay, please go ahead, Nkosi.
I think Dr. Ilze is spot on, just like with any addiction, any problem for that matter, we generally would seek professional assistance and support. And I think part of the problem actually that often leads to the prevalence of porn and the degenerative results that it has on society is the fact that we take it so lightly. We think it's something that I'll deal with. It's just a naughtiness, whatever. But if you think of how many people maybe started using innocent recreational drugs, however you'd use it, and as you said, they just got hooked more and more and more. It's the same thing here. We need to understand that addiction is addiction. that a snake is a snake, in no matter what forms it takes. And therefore, if you're at the point where you're saying, I am certain, or I have enough reasons to believe that this child is addicted, frankly, even this adult is addicted. And remember, it could be in a work environment. In the same way, we don't tolerate people drinking at work because we think they may pose a danger to the rest of us or to the team or whatever it may be, in all of those environments. And yes, maybe with adults, you may say there should be more self-responsible, and therefore you may not intervene in the same way. But once it's an addiction, you need to get professional help. And especially with children, rather than to make light of it and think, I will deal with this. Yes, when you do get professional help, the professionals tell you, as part of our rehab and recovery program, this is how we'd like the family to be supportive. Two, a lot of the time they may even tell you that you as the family, we also want to counsel you in such and such a way because there may be consequences for yourselves. Guys, let's have, there are hardware and software things you can do on cell phones and computers and access to the internet that maybe as a family and as a home you need to deal with and address. So those kind of things will come out from the professionals that would help. And as she said as well, professionals both in the church as well as in medical and other fields, because it's a comprehensive package solution that is required. Thank you.
We're having more and more people join in, and more questions are coming. If you have questions, we need to end this soon enough. So if you have questions, please throw them in. With respect to how do we then help the child that's already addicted, I echo everything that's already been said. Let's get professional help. One of the things that I need to say at this point is, in trying to help parents that have had to deal with their children that have been addicted, one of the things that we've had to do, and this is to rehash what Nkosi has said, we've had to also counsel the parents. And it has been my experience, sadly, more often than not, that one part is of the parenting duo, whether a single parent or a couple, is already addicted. We actually discover that a parent is addicted. And so even though they never expose the child directly, it then explains why, even if they were trying to address the issue. It will explain why they didn't address the issue. It will explain why, if they even tried to address the issue, they could not have been convincing enough, even in the way they approach the conversation. Definitely because it's already a problem. There is a statement that my friend, Pastor Chooks, used to say. He often will say that you cannot subdue a demon you patronize. And this is talking about other things. But I definitely understand the context in which he's saying it as it relates to this. It becomes very difficult to help somebody out of something that you are already a victim of, you're already a captive of. And this is important to note. And so before I even push on and we continue with the kids, I really want to stress, if you as an adult, you are addicted to porn, you need to deal with it. It has consequences on your brain. I've dealt with too many cases where individuals are paying money and are losing money because they need to feed this addiction. I've dealt with too many cases where the addiction has broken something in the psyche and they found themselves going outside of their marriages in order to reach certain sexual highs that they have trained their mind to experience due to the consistency of exposure to porn. I've had to deal with at least one, thank God so far, at least one situation where the husband made it clear, because of his years of exposure to porn, he was now insisting that his wife was not enough for him, and the wife needed to become a lot more open to the concept of having a third party join them on the marital bed. You see, you start out with a little. It's like with all forms of addiction. You start out with a little, and then all of a sudden, it grows, and it becomes a virus. Maybe poor choice of words now, considering what we're dealing with, but you get my drift. Comes a virus that just plagues your whole being, and then subsequently, of course, it escalates into other aspects of your life. And so before we move on, I need to stress, get help. Get help for yourself as an adult, get help for your kids. I still need us to deal with how to help the kids, because there are still some steps that parents, remember, you are still a parent. You are the parent. You are the one in charge of the home. all right? And so there are still things, in as much as you get professional help, that you can do in the space that you find yourself as the parent in the home. But before I go there, Pastor Chooks, please go right ahead.
All right. I have quite a bit to say around this.
We don't have too much time, so I need you to try and abridge it, because I'm getting, I've seen a few questions here that it would be great for us to answer.
I think, Pastor Tim, I think we need to do this again next week. There's quite a bit to talk about on the subject. Well, a few years ago, I was ministering overseas in India. And when I finished preaching, a man of God, you know, from what I could gather, he had a lot of respect among the Christian community in that city. He had a big ministry, had a lot of respect. So he came to me and said, Pastor, please, can I get an appointment to see you privately tomorrow? So I gave him an appointment. He came to the hotel where I was with his wife. I recognized that he's a man that carries stature in the city. And he said to me, you know, when we started talking, that what he wants to share with me, he could not share with anybody in India. He wanted to share it with someone who came from outside, because it's something that is killing him. And he has had the struggle for more than 25 years. And what was the struggle? Pornography. His father had passed away. His father was a big man of God in India. And he inherited the ministry from his dad. And okay, he said,
we're running out of time. I'll need you to really try and abridge this.
Okay. The point was that the pornography passed from his father to him, and then now to his children, and he's killing them. This thing is spiritual. I want to bring it out. It's spiritual. While we agreed that we need to get professional help, we need to talk to people if the children are hooked, but many times the parents open the door through which this devil got in and is affecting the children. So we need to seek spiritual help as well. That bondage needs to be broken. There are scientific evidence that there are rewiring in the brain that porn does. So that needs to, the power of God can alter that wiring and correct it. But in as much as seeking psychological or psychiatric help, we need to get spiritual help. And if we've opened doors that brought devils into the family, we need to go close those doors.
I totally agree. Just so that I don't forget, to the individual that was talking about a teenager in the home that could serve as a potential risk, your responsibility is to protect your home. So please remember that. If you have to send that teenager back home in order to protect your home, to protect the members of your family, please do that. It is your responsibility to protect your family. So make sure you do protect your family. I do agree with what Pastor Chooks has said. There are, in as much as we do seek, and when we've had to deal with situations like this, we do have social workers within the church, and so we direct them to the social worker. But we have also been able to engage them using the word of God to rewire the brain. Remember, it is exposure. It is the continuous exposure that causes the brain to begin to, that rewires it to point in a certain direction. The same exposure, like Nkosi said, when you begin to pour the right thing into the glass, like Doctor said, when you begin to grow the right kind of plant, grow flowers in the brain, when we taught them how to implant the word of God. I remember I was dealing with a young lad, he had become an addict. We took him to God's word, and for the sake of time, I might not be able to break it down. I hope I can. But we took him to God's word, and I showed him how he could use God's word, particularly from Romans 6, to rewire his brain. He did it for 30 minutes. The plan was do this do this procedure for 30 minutes every day. He did it 30 minutes every day. In 2 months, in less than 2 months, he comes back to me and he's in tears and he's talking about how he was exposed to the exact same problem. And all of a sudden, he was not having the same pull, the same drive, the same inclination that initially needed to have. Indeed, that's why the Bible speaks about how you need to guard your heart. The Bible talks about guarding your heart. It means guarding your space. You guard your space. I think Doc was really hammering on that. If you grow weeds, of course, then your whole mind will be full of weeds, and it will cascade into your life and your lifestyle. But if you grow flowers, that's what will cascade into your lifestyle. And so, yes, the word of God can actually be used, and we have seen the word of God bring about those transformations. Now, there is a very troubling question here, and I think I'm going to immediately direct this to Doc. This one gives me cause for immediate concern. Before I even read this question, let me say this. If you know somebody that is in danger, the person is in danger, they're being consistently abused, it is irresponsible for you not to do something about it. You don't just say, I don't know what it is. Irresponsible for you not to do something about it. Well, irrespective of who the individual is, you have somebody, a minor particularly, that is being abused. You need to do something about it. Hopefully, we will give you numbers to call. I will ask Auntie Tammy, my administrator, to please post on the comments numbers that deal with, numbers to call that deal with sexual abuse, sexual violation. Please post those numbers, call those numbers, and engage. Something needs to be done, because if you don't do something, you are complicit. Let me read this question. If a male child is abused most of the time, I'll read it the way it is, and then we'll try and make sense of it. If a male child is abused most of the times, then all things ends up in a boy's mind. I guess the person saying it corrupts the mind. How can a boy child or males who are abused come out and seek for help? Because they become mentally abusive themselves as they grow. I have noticed that, and the statistics seem to point towards the direction that the abused become abusers, stand a likely chance of becoming abusers themselves. And so it's very important to address this. And so I guess the question is saying there is a child who has been consistently abused. How do we help these abused men in particular? And I guess I understand why he's saying men, because women, in my experience, are more likely to share. How do we get the men to become a lot more open, to share that they are going through this or they have been through this? Can we quickly address that? Yes, Doc, please.
So the only way that anybody can receive help is if they ask for help. To go to a person that can be trusted, whether it is a teacher, a family member, someone at the church, but ask for help. And specifically ask for help from a person that is respected and to be trusted. Because if you don't ask for help, nobody can give you help. And if you know of abuse taking place, it is also our responsibility to step in and report it. Because if you don't have the ability to bring a stop to it, you have to go to a higher power and higher authority to bring a stop to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to say this before Nkosi? Please go ahead.
If I may, Pastor, I think it's an interesting question, this, and I think it has been answered in terms of our responsibility where we are aware of abuse and the likes. And you've touched on an important aspect that speaks to how do we get the men or those who have been abused to be open. And I think, there are common forms, and I say common with the utmost, I cringe as I say it, but we've seen the sexual violence and sexual abuse statistics of this country. So we know that there are gender-based violence crimes that violence and crimes that take place in this country are on a massive scale. For me, that question could have been asked by someone who actually has also been abused. And they're sitting there and they're finding themselves still captive to what may have been done to them decades ago, to what may have been done to them by someone whom they trusted and loved, a father, an uncle, a relative, someone in a trusted position. So, you know, and I think that question itself is a recognition of something, and I may not necessarily have the answer. But the one thing that I found, and I mean, I certainly used to suffer from anger in particular, and I think it's because my father was physically abusive, a violent man in that sense. But I can tell you that, and to go back to what you and Pastor Chuk said earlier, exposure, for example, to the Word of God, and I just want to use that as an example in the context of once you begin to understand your self-worth and your value, who you are as a person, as Dr. Ilze said, understanding that God as your Father has been planting flowers in your mind, for want of a better description. Once you begin to be exposed to some of the teachings, for example, that I've come across in our church, and you begin to understand who you actually are, once you begin to understand that there are people and there's a family, let's say in our case, the church, or people who care about you, doesn't necessarily have to just be the church, who see your worth now and don't want to allow what happened to you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, by someone who themselves had perhaps the wrong identity and obviously did something wrong, to define who you are now. I think that exposure to those kind of things begins to change. I had someone, and I've shared this with you,
I need
Pastor,
you to hurry
who
this
shared
on.
with me
Right.
that they were sexually abused, in particular raped. And they said they'd been carrying this thing around, and I was the first person they ever spoke to about this, let alone then I shared it with you. But they could only get to that place because something inside responded to the environment in which they were surrounded. And I think what we need to be doing as this forum, and I think Pastor Chooks is right, we need to talk more, but even as our churches, professionals like Dr. Ilze, I think we need to find a way to create opportunities where people can access information, access support. Because I think we tend to resist because we're ashamed of what happened. And then as the barriers get broken down, we open up. And I think for men in particular, there is not enough fora available where men can just be honest about the things that they've been through without being judged, being seen to be weak, and so on and so on. And I think part of the ministry's work in what we're trying to do is to create platforms where men can do that. Sometimes it has to be one-on-one, but other times it will be broader. Thank you, sir.
I think I must add that and echo that there are not enough forums for men, and we need to try and create more fora for men to be able to engage in stuff like this. The likelihood that a man will hide this is okay. Maybe I don't know what the numbers are out there, but in my experience, the likelihood that a man will hide his abuse is a lot higher from my exposure. We need to find a way to create more meetings and more gatherings and more endeavors where men can actually be open enough to actually say that this is where I'm coming from. You can't help as a parent if you are broken. How do you help others? Your child who is experiencing a similar brokenness, it becomes very difficult to do so. So we see this as a cry for help. Another question that has been put out there is, I think we've already answered this because I need to quickly answer this so that we can bring this to a close in another 10 minutes. When is the right age for you to talk to your kids about sex? I think from my experience and from the material that we have been exposed to and what we've seen has worked, usually kids become a lot more aware of themselves and of stuff like that, from like that that's sex and sexuality, particularly sexuality, from that 3, particularly 4 going older. I don't know, maybe Dr. Ilze would want to say, clarify with respect to that. And so I would say from that age, 3, 4, you begin to engage. But if before that age, your child already begins to ask you questions, what is that? And it's an articulate question, and it's not just one of those ooh, shiny, you know, but an articulate question, then engage. But you need to know what to communicate depending on the age of the child. Again, that's why materials that are out there, including Dr. Ilze's book, are very helpful. And I do have some materials that just try to draw your attention to, at this age, maybe go this far, at this age, go this far. But remember, if you're trying to stop at a particular point, the child already seems to know more than that, then the boundary has been pushed. Push your conversation further. You need to accommodate, preferably as much of what we already are aware of, so that they get the right information. Dr. Ilze, do you want to throw something in there?
I fully agree with what you said. And you start with your very first conversations, and I've said this already, and you just start to name the different names of the private parts of males and females. And you build up from then, I'm repeating myself, so I don't want to waste time, that by the age of 6, you must have had your first conversation, or your conversations with your children. What is sex, how babies are born, the difference between males and females, why, you know, how to handle touching your private parts, not to do that in private. So the basic conversations to be done with your kids by the age when they turn 6.
Thank you. I totally agree. Now there is a question. I want us to conclude this by addressing the fact that, okay, so my child is not yet hooked on porn, or my child is hooked on porn, but I realize that porn is an issue. I want to protect my home. What are some of the things that I can do? Let me weigh in on that. Of course, we're talking about your kids. If you're going to help your kids, you start with helping yourself. If you have pornographic access and material in your home, my first exposure when I was a kid to pornographic material was the pornographic material that my father had. I will never forget. You know, those, I think I was about 11 or 12. So of course, I guess I was exposed at a much older age. Kids are exposed a lot younger now. But in my case, a cousin shows up. I'll never forget. I was in my bedroom, and my cousins were my cousins were in the lounge. My older cousins were in the lounge, and all of a sudden, I noticed commotion in the lounge. I go out there, and one of my cousins is saying to the other one, "Do you know that their dad has something in the bedroom?" I didn't know what they were on about. I just sat there in the lounge. They went into with one of my siblings into the bedroom, came out with a little VHS tape, played it, and for a split second, we saw pornographic material. I saw pornographic material. My goodness, I will not lie. My interest was stoked. You know, and I was wondering, what is that? And why are they all giggly? You know, because, you know, the whole disposition, they were all giggly about it. They quickly took it off. They went back. Why was it hidden somewhere in my father's bedroom? You know, and I had enough common sense to report all of them to my mom. You know, I told my mom, and you know, that became a huge thing, and became an issue. And then my mom had a conversation with me, and I could see that my mom wished, you know, that it wasn't happening. But then we started a conversation. And I don't know if my father got rid of those materials, but if you have in your homes, you need to start from there. Get rid of them. Also, you need to police access points. Look, the truth is, you can't control access points on the outside, but this is your home. You can police access points in your own home, and you need to police them. What are the access points? You and I will agree that kids are, the access points are a lot more available now than when we were much younger. A lot more available. There was no internet when I was growing up. There were no cell phones when I was growing up. None of these were there. And so if you didn't go to a club, a video club, to borrow an actual movie, you never got access to pornography. If you didn't buy or get access to a magazine, you never got access to pornography. And so I grew up in a world that was a lot less exposed. Doesn't mean people didn't have access. At least the video clubs then, you couldn't borrow because your age didn't allow you to borrow. They would not allow you to borrow a movie like that. Today, it is, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's everywhere. We watch adverts. I was watching an advert with my daughter. My daughter was sitting, she was lying down on me, and we're watching an advert. It was an advert for perfume. An advert for perfume. The lady was topless. This is perfume. Goodness, how would I have known to protect my child from a perfume advert? She was topless. The guy was in his briefs, and he comes all sensual and, you know, and he lays, and I was like, my God, where's that remote? Where's the remote? You know, but it was already too late. The point I'm making is it's everywhere, but in your own home, you can try and put safeguards. So before I'll let everybody else say their bits with respect to how to protect. But I want to take you, before we close, to certain apps that you can use, because you must police laptops, you must police cell phones, you must police, you must put age restrictions on iPads, you must put age restrictions on your DSTV. If you have kids at home, you need to try. It is your home. They might not like you for it, but so what? You are a parent. At some point, you want to be friends and friendly with them, but do not confuse friendship with your kids with your responsibility as a parent. There is still that responsibility as a parent. So at some point, I would draw your attention to certain websites that we can go to that will show you certain apps that you can install. Some you install on the devices, others you can use remotely so that you can pay attention to what is going on. Now, some people argue that spying on your kids, doing all of this, it's not helpful, it's not healthy. I disagree. I don't think it's spying on the kids. I think it's being aware of what's going on. You see, in my case, it's not something hidden. It's put on the table. I've given you this. It's not a right, this handset, this device. It's not a right, it's a privilege. I'm paying for it. It's a privilege. And since it's a privilege, there are rules that govern it. And these are my rules, and I have the rules. They know the rules. And these are the things that are on this phone to ensure that the rules are being followed. Those are some of the things that we have done to try and help so that they don't fall prey, you know. But none of this replaces regular conversations and making sure that you are accessible for them to interact with. So I'll take you there. But before I continue, anybody else wants to throw out a thought? How do you safeguard your home front? I see Nkosi, you're already unmuted. Go right ahead.
I fully agree with everything you've said, Pastor. And I think, as Dr. Ilze said, we're not taking away the value of the conversations and that engagement. That's the primary defensive and offensive move. But there are some pragmatic things you can do. You can, as you said, I mean, placing computers in public spaces. You don't want to have computers sitting in private rooms where bedrooms where kids can do things that you can't see. You want to have, as you said, there are apps like Covenant Eyes, Safe Eyes, that allow you to filter what your kids do and what they see, whether it's on DSTV, whether it's on the phone. I mean, the phones are key ones.
Please hold on. Can somebody please type that? Because the apps you just mentioned, they are very helpful. Covenant Eyes, Safe Eyes. Please go right ahead. Someone type that out so that others who follow this can see that. Sorry.
I think what we also want to do, Pastor, is, as you said, we're friendly with our children, but we're not necessarily only friends, we're parents. So even things like social media, you want to join the social media, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, where your kids are, you want to know their passwords. They must know you know their passwords. At night, you want to take cell phones and charge them so that you can again check and make sure that the kind of incoming pictures and I mean, this is what you actively do to defend your child and to, yes, you are defending them in terms of what I'm saying, but also, as we said, the conversations you're having are empowering them because you're putting hard filters, whereas the conversations give them the permanent filter in their mind where you will never always be. So you do both. But things like that, even these direct questions, have you ever received a sext, a naked picture being sent to you, requested? You know, we know that the pedophiles, the stalkers, and those kind of people are targeting our children through social media. So you've got to say, look, it's tough luck, but I'm going to know your Facebook password, your Instagram password, your Snapchat password, your TikTok password, your house chat, house party, whatever these things are. And you actually check this and make sure that you have that access. WhatsApp statuses. When your kids start blocking you from WhatsApp statuses, why are they doing that? What are they hiding? So there's got to be that constant vigilance, but those are some of the practical things that we can do as parents every day, all the time, to make sure that we give additional cover to what we are doing to fortify our children's minds.
Okay, Pastor Chooks wants to say something. Let me quickly add, I was with a parent who was talking to me, and then she quickly mentioned that my child just blocked me on WhatsApp. I'm not having any of that. That's absolute nonsense. And I knew that that child was going to have it when they got home. And that is you not being parents. Some parents are too afraid to do this because they're thinking, then my child won't like me. I won't be my child's friend. Please listen. You need to protect your children. There is a terrible world out there. There are predators out there. There are predators out there. And if you are unaware of what's going on, you put yourself at risk. I'll take this from you, Pastor Chooks, and maybe one final thought from Dr. Ilze, and then we will end this conversation. Please go right ahead, Pastor.
Okay. So what I want to throw in quickly, you also need to watch behavioral changes in the child. When suddenly a child goes into their room and lock the door, what are they doing? What are they watching? You get into their room and they suddenly hide the phone under the bed or hide the tablet under the bed. What are they doing? Watch for behavioral changes. If a child suddenly is withdrawn, and they didn't used to be withdrawn like this, what has happened? Watch for behavioral changes. Usually, those are cues to something that you need to pay attention to.
Thank you. I think that is very helpful. Doc, please.
Well, I fully agree with everybody. And we are the parents. We are not their friends. And I pay for your cell phone and I pay for your airtime, and therefore I have all that. It actually belongs to me, and I have the right to do checks. So first, be the parent. Tim, you're on
Pastor,
mute.
I think you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Thank you. I was saying, I see some questions being asked. We can't do that now. We're already over an hour and a half. Thank you so much. It wasn't supposed to have taken this long. Thank you to all my guests. I am so helped. I have gotten some thoughts that I need to go and contemplate and filter through. But if you don't mind, I want to quickly show you something that a site that you can go to concerning options and apps that you can use. I hope you all can see what I am showing you on the screen. Let me see. Let me try and take that down. I'm hoping that you can see what's on my screen now. I'm trying to share something on the screen. If you can see it, let me take you all the way to the very top. I'll take you all the way. So you will see that the website that I am on is called geckoandfly.com. Geckoandfly.com. In order to know what I search for is 13 spying apps. Don't let the term spying apps put you in a bit of a bind, but 13 spying apps to monitor and track your children's smartphone. I have no shame in using any of these because I have only one chance to parent my children. I have just the one chance. So I have no shame in doing this. So you see this one, Spicy. Now, a lot of these ones are American-based, and so they're quite pricey, as you can see. There is one here that is not as pricey. So you see different options. There's this one that is actually free. It's called Quest. This is Logs Kit. Let's see. There is one here. Let me see if I can quickly find it. That is called Questa. Now, Questa is more or less free. The concern, though, with Questa is that it doesn't really give you insights into things like the social media page. And you need access to social media platforms like your Facebook, your Instagram, your WhatsApp. You need that. So that's the limitation that I have with Questa. But my favorite is actually this one. Let me show you this one. This one is actually my favorite, and I would recommend that if you're looking for something to use, the price is not bad as well. So if you're looking for something to use, please explore this particular one. Let's see if I can get that on. It's called Spy IC or Spy Ink or Spy Ink. Please explore this particular one. The options are very good. It gives you opportunities to access these ones, all these apps and platforms that you can see on your screen. So messages, calls, social apps, locations, photos. It actually gives you access to that, right? And if I'm not mistaken, the way Spy Ink works, it's your kids do not even know that that you have access. You can remotely have access to their phone once you have certain information, and it works both for Android and iOS. I guess I found myself in this position where I had to consider options like this when I started dealing with many kids that were going through stuff like this. And I said, look, before this thing invades my space, let me be armed and let me be ready. So we're going to close this now. I want to close by saying this to, you have a thought you want to throw out there? Doc, I see you are unmuted. Do you want to say something? Okay, so we're good. All right, I want to close this and I will close with a prayer. But let me encourage you. It's not the end of the world. If you are addicted to porn or your kid is addicted to porn, there is help out there. Reach out to a social worker, reach out to people like Doc, reach out to your pastor. Look, we have dealt with a number of cases like this, so we are familiar with some of the resources that are available. And also remember, there is the spiritual aspect of this. Saints, please don't forget, the word of God is the Bible talks about being able to renew your mind. And that is what the word of God can do. It can actually fortify you and strengthen you and subsequently give you the Bible talks about being strengthened with might by the Spirit in your inner man. So from within, you have the fortification to stand and resist the same temptation that you couldn't resist before. If you learn, if you receive tutoring on how to appropriate the word to deal with this scenario. Fortify your homes, fortify your space. And finally, if you are in a difficult position, if there is a child watching this, you know a child that is being abused, please, I've asked my staff to put details on this page, scroll down, put it there. We will attach it to the top of the video, numbers for you to call. Dr. Ilze also sent me some information. We will attach that to the video. Call those numbers. Seek for help. Do not hide this. If you are embarrassed, if you feel ashamed, I want to say to you, reach out to me on this platform. Go to my messenger. Since you're watching this, you can reach me on Messenger. My profile is public. Reach me on Messenger. If I cannot help you directly, because there's a limit, I'm one person, what I can do, I will point you in the right direction. We will point you in the right direction. You will get help. This is a scourge that we need to confront, and we really can confront and win this. Final word from Pastor Chooks?
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Tim, for putting this conversation together tonight. I definitely have really learned just listening to everybody, to add to what I already know. So thank you. And for people out there, well, there's help. Every one of us, we have a responsibility to look after our children. You have only one chance to parent them. Let's not waste that one chance. Good night.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for our time together. I hope strongly that you will ride, and I pray that you will ride on the wings of our conversation to help a life, to help a father, help a mother, help a child out there, that at the end of all of this, they will receive the resource required, the emboldenment and confidence required to engage these scenarios and get help. Father, I thank you because I know that you have been through. I bless everyone that has been online with us. Thank you because you will refresh them. As they have helped us, help them also, as it is in your habit and your nature to do so. Thank you so much. To everyone that was watching, thank you for your time. We hope to put more shows like this. If you were blessed, if you were helped, send us a comment so that we know that this was very helpful and we can do more of things like this in the future. Thank you so very much to all my guests. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I will reach out to you personally just to thank you. But again, thank you ever so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday night. I've taken the most of your time. Thank you. God bless you. Bye for now. Can we all say bye? Can we all say bye? Bye, 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 bye. Come on, say bye.
Bye.
Bye.